When I first stepped into Damon Blackwell's mansion, I wasn't thinking about alphas, fated mates, or the quiet pull I'd feel every time he looked at me. I was thinking about rent, about survival, and about the 6-year-old boy I'd been hired to take care of. The housekeeper, an older woman named Marin, met me at the door. She scanned me up and down, lips pressed into a thin line. "You're younger than I expected," she said. "I'm older when I don't sleep," I replied lightly. She didn't smile. "Mr. Blackwell doesn't like noise. Or questions." "Good," I murmured. "Neither do I." Her warning made sense the second he appeared at the top of the staircase. Damon Blackwell, tall, broad, impossibly composed, moving with a quiet authority that demanded attention even without a word. His gray eyes locked on me instantly, sharp and calculating, like he could see through every layer I tried to hide. "You're Luca." His voice was low, deliberate, resonating in the high-ceilinged hall. "Yes, sir," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Eli's upstairs. Marin will show you the schedule. Meals are at 8, 1, and 7. I don't tolerate lateness or disobedience." Disobedience. That word hit differently coming from him. "I understand," I said. He nodded once, pivoted, and left, leaving behind the faint scent of rain and something darker. Something that made my stomach tighten in ways I didn't expect. Upstairs, his son waited. Eli Blackwell, 6 years old. Sharp, quiet, brilliant beyond his years. He had his father's gray eyes, the same unbothered calm that could make adults stumble over their words. And he was the reason I was here. I found him in the playroom, less a child's room and more a miniature museum. Toys and learning tools arranged meticulously, not a single thing out of place. Eli sat on a plush rug, building an intricate structure with magnetic blocks, entirely absorbed. "Hey, Eli," I said softly, taking a cautious seat on the floor. "I'm Luca. I'll be spending time with you while I'm here." He didn't look at me. He didn't flinch. He just added another block to his tower, his silence more intimidating than any adult could be. "You're not like the others," he finally said, voice small but certain. "The others?" I asked. "They all left. They smiled too much. They didn't stay." He flicked a glance at me. "You don't smile like that." "I guess I haven't earned the reason to show my teeth yet," I said seriously. A tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth. Victory in a way I hadn't expected. The day settled into a quiet rhythm. Marin brought lunch, precise and almost clinical. Eli ate meticulously, no crumbs, no spills. Watching him was like tending a small, solemn prince. Then I felt it, that subtle shift in the air. Damon appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, gray eyes assessing, cold yet layered. For a second, I saw something almost hidden in him, a deep, aching sadness. And then, like he realized I was watching, his gaze snapped to mine. The intensity was physical, a silent question I wasn't ready to answer. Eli looked up at his father with effortless comfort. "Daddy." "Yes, buddy?" Damon replied, low and steady. But his eyes lingered on me just a heartbeat too long before he disappeared down the hall. After lunch, I convinced Eli to leave the playroom. "Show me the garden?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded, slipping his small hand into mine. The contact was brief, but it sent a surprising jolt of protectiveness through me. The backyard was a vast, manicured paradise, but it felt as sterile as the inside of the house. We walked along a stone path, the air fresh and clean. That's when I felt the first drop of rain. Then another. Within seconds, the sky opened up. "Come on," I laughed, grabbing Eli's hand again and pulling him under the cover of a large oak tree. We weren't completely dry, but it was enough. The rain fell in sheets, drumming a loud tattoo on the leaves above us. Eli looked up at the sky, and for the first time, I saw a real, genuine expression of wonder on his face. I knelt down, pointing at a puddle that was forming nearby. "Bet you can't jump in that and make a bigger splash than me." He looked at me, his gray eyes wide. We'll get messy. That's the point. I grinned. A real smile, small but undeniable, broke through his solemn mask. We were both soaked and breathless from laughing when a shadow fell over us. We turned in unison. Damon stood there, holding a large black umbrella. He wasn't looking at his muddy, wet son. He was looking at me. His gaze traveled from my rain-plastered hair down to my drenched shirt and the grass stains on my knees. His jaw was tight, his expression thunderous. My heart plummeted. I'd broken a rule. I'd been late for something. I'd been disobedient. I'd made a mess of his perfect son. Sir, I started, bracing for the dismissal. But then his eyes shifted to Eli. The boy was looking up at his father, not with fear, but with a bright, eager light in his eyes I was sure Damon hadn't seen in a long time. Daddy, we made the puddles jump, Eli exclaimed, his voice full of uncharacteristic excitement. Damon's stern expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. The storm in them receded, just a little. He looked from his son's radiant face back to mine. The anger was gone, replaced by something complex and unreadable. Without a word, he stepped forward, extending the umbrella to cover both of us. Inside, he said, his voice still a command, but it lacked its earlier bite. Before you catch a cold. He didn't wait for us, turning to walk back toward the mansion. But he walked slowly, ensuring the umbrella still shielded us from the downpour. As we followed him, Eli slipped his small, wet hand back into mine and squeezed. I squeezed back, my heart hammering. We followed the silent, imposing figure of Damon Blackwell back into the mansion, leaving a trail of rainwater on the pristine marble floor. The air inside felt heavy, almost still, after the wild freedom of the storm. Eli, still holding my hand, was practically vibrating with excitement. His earlier reserve completely washed away. Marin appeared, carrying 2 large, fluffy towels, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Goodness, child. Look at you, she said, briskly drying Eli's hair. It was fun, Marin. Eli's voice was muffled by the towel. Luca made the puddles jump. I stood there, dripping onto the floor, feeling exposed under Damon's gaze. He had closed the umbrella and was simply watching, assessing the damage. I braced myself for the lecture, for the cold dismissal I expected. Marin, he said, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. Draw a warm bath for Eli. Right away, sir, she said, shepherding a still chattering Eli toward the staircase. That left me alone in the foyer with the alpha. I clutched the towel Marin had handed me, unsure where to look. Mr. Blackwell, sir, I apologize. I didn't mean to. He interrupted me, calm but firm. He called you Luca. I blinked. What? Eli. Damon took a step closer. The scent of rain and pine clung to him, mixing with the faint petrichor rising from my own soaked clothes. He doesn't use names. Not for the nannies. You were the man or him. He called you Luca. My chest tightened. I told him he could. He took another step closer now. My heart pounded against my ribs as I noticed the tiny flecks of silver in his stormy gray eyes, catching the dim light like fragments of ice. You're covered in mud, he observed, eyes tracing slowly down my body. Fire shot through me at the intensity. I know. I'm sorry. I'll clean it up, I said, voice barely above a whisper. A long silence stretched between us. I was certain he was going to fire me. Instead, he said something that completely disarmed me. He laughed, Damon murmured low, almost a whisper, as if confessing something private. I haven't heard him laugh like that since. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Finally, he broke his gaze from me, looking toward the staircase where Eli had disappeared. Get cleaned up. Dinner is at 7. Don't be late. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the grand foyer, shivering, soaked, and more confused than ever. Upstairs, I took a hot shower in my small but luxurious attached bathroom. Clean clothes replaced my drenched ones, and I felt a little more human. 10 minutes to 7. I wouldn't be late. The dining room was a cavernous space dominated by a long, dark wood table that could seat 20. Only 3 places were set, 1 at the head and 2 adjacent. Eli entered first, hair still damp, smelling faintly of baby shampoo. He didn't speak, simply coming to stand beside my chair. A moment later, Damon appeared. Fresh clothes, dark sweater, trousers. He moved to the head of the table, and the air seemed to still, centering around him. Marin served the meal. Steak and roasted potatoes. Simple but perfectly cooked. Only the clinking of cutlery filled the space. This wasn't a family meal, it was a ritual. Eli picked at his food, solemn again. I decided to break the silence. "This is really good," I said, voice a little too loud in the quiet room. Damon's eyes flicked up at me. A single, curt nod. Eli glanced between us, then carefully cut a piece of steak, holding it up proudly. "Daddy, look, I cut it myself." Damon froze mid-fork, gaze softening as he looked at his son. "Well done, my boy," he said, simple but genuine. A proud smile touched Eli's lips. Then he turned to me. "Luca, can we read a story after dinner? A long one." "Of course we can," I replied, smiling. When I looked up, Damon's eyes met mine again. Different now. Not the assessing glare of an employer, nor the scowl of a man whose rules had been broken. This was deeper, contemplative, intense. It made a hot flush creep up my neck. He held my gaze for a moment, then returned to his meal. "Be sure to finish your green beans, Eli," he murmured, low and commanding. The rest of the meal passed in slightly less oppressive silence. When Eli finished, he asked politely, "Daddy, may I be excused?" "Of course, son," Damon replied, watching him. Eli slid off his chair, surprising me by giving my arm a quick hug before darting out, calling back, "I'll pick the book." I remained at the table with Damon. The tension thickened again. I wiped my mouth with my napkin, preparing to leave. "Luca," he said. The sound of my name on his lips jolted me. "Yes, sir." He leaned back, gaze unwavering. "Tomorrow, ensure he wears his rain boots if you plan on making the puddles jump again." I stared, thrown. Was that permission? Was that almost a sense of humor? "I will, sir," I said, voice trembling slightly. A single, almost imperceptible nod. Dismissed. The next week settled into a fragile, almost tender rhythm. Mornings were filled with educational games and laughter that echoed faintly through the cold halls of the mansion. Afternoons were for the garden. Rain boots firmly on Eli's little feet, and evenings were for long, elaborate story times that usually ended with him asleep mid-sentence. Eli was slowly unfurling, like a flower finally seeing the sun after too long in the shade. And Damon was a paradox. He was everywhere and nowhere at once. I'd feel his presence before I saw him. A subtle shift in the air that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. Sometimes, I'd catch a shadow in the doorway when Eli and I played. Other times, I'd glance toward the balcony above the garden and see him standing there, silent, hands in his pockets, eyes following his son. He never interrupted. He never spoke. But his gaze, it was constant, heavy, and impossible to ignore. It was during one of those garden afternoons that his perfect, impenetrable armor finally cracked. Eli had discovered the joy of rolling down a small grassy hill behind the house. He was a blur of laughter and limbs, his little boots flailing as he tumbled down. I stood at the bottom, ready to catch him. "Again, Luca! Again!" he shouted, cheeks flushed pink with delight. He scrambled back up and launched himself down once more. But this time, his tiny body veered sharply to the left, straight toward a low rose bush. My heart lurched. "Eli!" I shouted, sprinting toward him. But I wasn't going to reach him in time. Before I could take another step, a dark blur rushed past me. Damon. He moved with impossible speed and precision, scooping Eli up just inches before the sharp thorns could touch him. He turned mid-motion, holding his son tightly against his chest. The world seemed to stop. Damon stood there, chest heaving, his face pale beneath his tan. His hands were trembling as they clutched Eli close. "Daddy!" Eli gasped, startled and crying. "I've got you," Damon whispered. His voice was low, rough, nothing like the calm, commanding tone I'd grown used to. "You're safe. You're safe, buddy." He buried his face in Eli's hair, just for a second, his whole frame shuddering. "I'm sorry," I breathed when I reached them, my voice shaking. "I should have been closer. I should have." He looked up then, his eyes locked on mine. The emotion there wasn't anger. It was fear, pure and raw, still bleeding through his self-control. In that moment, I didn't see an alpha CEO. I saw a father who loved his son more than his own life. Something inside me twisted painfully. "It's all right," Damon said at last, his voice finding steadiness again. He set Eli down gently, crouched to meet his tear-streaked face, and brushed a thumb over his cheek. "You're okay, son, but you must be more careful." "Understood." Eli nodded weakly, still hiccuping. Damon stood, but his back was rigid, the muscles in his jaw tight. He didn't look at me again as he walked toward the house, carrying Eli's small rain boots in one hand. That night, everything changed. After our bedtime story, Eli was half asleep, clutching his stuffed bear. I tucked him in and turned to leave, but his little hand caught mine. "Luca?" he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "Yes, buddy? Stay until I'm asleep?" My heart melted. Of course. I sat on the edge of his bed, humming softly, running my thumb over his small fingers until his breathing steadied. He drifted off, safe and warm. I waited a few extra minutes before gently slipping my hand free. The door clicked softly behind me. Damon stood there, leaning against the doorframe. The hall light behind him cast his face half in shadow. His gaze fell first on his son, then on me, and finally on our still-linked hands. There was no anger in his expression, just something tired, sad, maybe even grateful. I started to explain, but stopped when he lifted a hand slightly. "I know," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, like it hadn't been used for hours. "He doesn't usually ask anyone to stay. He just needed to feel safe," I said softly. He nodded, eyes lingering on Eli. "Safe," he echoed. "That's all that matters." When he looked back at me, the intensity of his gaze sent a pulse through my chest. "And do you think he feels safe with you?" Damon asked. The question carried weight far beyond its words. "I hope so," I said honestly. "I'm trying." He stepped closer, until the faint scent of his cologne wrapped around me. Pine, rain, smoke. His presence filled the hallway, quiet but overwhelming. "You're trying," he murmured, almost to himself. His hand lifted slightly, as though he wanted to touch my face, but he stopped halfway, curling his fingers into a fist. A muscle jumped in his jaw. For a long, charged moment, we just stood there in the soft light, the air between us thick with something unspoken. "Good night, Luca," he said finally, his voice a shade deeper than before. "Good night, Mr. Blackwell," I whispered. He turned away, his footsteps fading down the hall, but the air he left behind felt alive. Buzzing, heavy, impossible to breathe in without feeling him. I pressed a hand to my chest. My heart was racing. My legs felt weak. The fortress had cracks, and I was terrified to realize that I wanted to find my way inside. A month later, a thick, cream-colored envelope appeared on my nightstand. Marin had left it there without a word. Inside, elegant script announced the annual Ethelberg Alpha Charity Gala. Scrawled at the bottom in a sharp, decisive hand was a note. "Your attendance is required. D." My stomach flipped. The thought of being in a room of powerful alphas, of watching Damon in his element, made my pulse quicken for reasons I couldn't explain. 2 nights later, the gala arrived. I stood in front of the floor-length mirror, adjusting the cuff of my shirt. I'd spent a good portion of my first paycheck on a simple, well-tailored black suit. It was the nicest thing I'd ever owned, but in the Blackwell mansion it felt like costume jewelry. Play-acting someone I wasn't. A soft knock sounded. Marin entered, holding a long, slender box. "From Mr. Blackwell," she said, voice unreadable. "He insists." I opened the box. Nestled inside were cufflinks. Dark polished sapphires set in sleek platinum, catching the light like fragments of night. Masculine, cold, and impossibly expensive. My breath hitched as I fastened them. The stones felt like a claim. When I descended the staircase, Eli stood at the bottom in his pajamas, eyes wide. "Luca, you look like a prince." I smiled, nerves softening. "Thank you, buddy." Then I felt him. A presence that filled the foyer before I even saw his face. Damon stood at the entryway in a tux that had been cut to his body alone. The fabric hugged broad shoulders, the silhouette somehow more dangerous in formal wear. He scanned me head to toe, his gaze landing on the sapphires at my wrists. For the first time in weeks, his mask slipped. The look he gave me was hot, appreciative, almost personal. "The car is here," he said, voice low as gravel. The gala was a swirl of glittering light, champagne, and low-power conversation. Cameras flashed. Whispers wrapped around us as if we were a scandal in the making. The reclusive Alpha Blackwell and his unknown male +1. Damon's hand rested at the small of my back. A firm, guiding pressure that felt like ownership. He introduced me coolly, formal and distant. "This is Luca, Eli's caregiver." I felt like an accessory. Necessary, visible, but not seen. The thrill of his earlier look faded to cold understanding. I was playing a role. A slow song started. A sleek woman with silver blonde hair and an expensive perfume approached. An alpha in her own right. Power radiated from her like a scent. "Damon, darling," she purred, ignoring me. "You've been hiding. You never returned my calls about the merger." Her hand settled possessively on his arm. Damon's posture tightened. "Now is not the time, Celine." "Oh, but when is?" she said, finally glancing at me with a dismissive curiosity. "I see you have help." Her condescension was a slap. Heat rose to my cheeks. Damon's jaw clenched. The script was obvious. I was to step back, invisible again. Something inside me, an ember that had kindled every time Damon looked my way, flickered. I couldn't be just scenery. "Eli is a wonderful boy," I said, voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "It's a pleasure to care for him." Celine's smile was thin and knife-edged. "How quaint." She turned back to Damon. "We should dance. For old time's sake." The air grew thick with tension. Damon's hand on my back tightened almost imperceptibly. I knew what was expected. I was the nanny. I was to step aside. But something rebellious, something that had been growing since I first felt his gaze in the hallway, stirred inside me. Damon looked at Celine, then his eyes dropped to me. The storm in them was raging. I saw the conflict, the expectation of his world, and something else, something new. "I'm afraid this dance is taken," he said, his voice cutting through the music. Celine's face fell in shock. Then, Damon turned to me fully, his broad frame blocking her out. He didn't ask. He simply took my hand in his other hand settling firmly on my waist, and pulled me onto the dance floor. The ballroom narrowed to the space between us. His hand was warm and sure. His other hand's grip at my waist was firm and claiming. He held me as if defying anyone who questioned him. The scent of him, rain, pine, and a new smoky warmth, closed around me, intoxicating. "You didn't have to do that," I whispered as we began to move. "Yes," he murmured, breath ghosting my ear. "I did." He looked down at me in a way that stole my breath. It wasn't the employer's gaze. It was the look of a man who wanted someone he wasn't supposed to want. "The cufflinks," I managed. "They're beautiful." "Thank you. They're the color of your eyes when you stand in the garden just before it rains." he said so low only I heard. The admission shattered the last of my defenses. The music, the crowd, Celine's fury, all receded into background noise. There was only the weight of his body, his closeness, the heat of his hand at my waist. When the song ended, he didn't release me. For a long, breathless moment we stood like that. "We're leaving," he said, voice rough. He guided me through the staring crowd, cradling my wrist with a possessive hold, and we slipped into the waiting town car. He said nothing during the drive. His profile was a hard, beautiful silhouette against passing city lights. Back at the mansion, he walked me to the foot of the stairs. The night air felt thick with everything we hadn't said. "Good night, Luca," he said, eyes dropping to my lips. "Good night, Damon," I whispered, daring to use his name. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He gave a curt nod and vanished into the darkness of his study, leaving me there with the cool sapphires at my wrists and a heart that misbehaved for reasons other than rent. The next morning, the mansion felt different, electric, intimate, dangerous. When we passed each other in the hallway, Damon's gaze lingered like a physical touch. His "good morning, Luca," rumbled deep in my chest. Eli seemed brighter too, more affectionate, as if the fragile bridge forming between his father and me made his world steadier. One morning he taped a drawing to the refrigerator. 3 stick figures under a smiling sun. Daddy, Luca, and Eli. That drawing started everything. I was packing a picnic with Marin when Damon walked in, phone in hand. He stopped when he saw the taped picture. His body went still. The softness from the gala vanished, leaving a cold, hard outline. "What is that?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. "It's a drawing Eli made," Marin said carefully. Damon reached forward and ripped the paper off the fridge. His knuckles were white. "This is not appropriate." My chest dropped. "Damon, he's just a child. He's happy. He's creating a fantasy." Damon snapped, eyes locking on me, sudden fury flashing. "A fantasy that doesn't exist. You are his nanny. You are an employee. This," he crushed the paper in his fist, "is a line that cannot be crossed." The whiplash was brutal. The man who'd held me at the gala, who'd whispered about my eyes, disappeared in a heartbeat. In his place stood the cold alpha I'd met weeks ago. "Are you firing me?" I asked, voice small. He stepped forward. Power pulsed off him like heat. "Do you want to be fired, Luca? Is this getting too real? Too messy?" Anger and hurt blistered through me. "It's not about me. It's about Eli. He needs consistency. He needs to feel loved." "Is that too messy for Alpha Blackwell to handle?" I had crossed a line. The growl that rose from his chest was animal, raw and warning. Marin retreated, discreet and quick. "You know nothing about what I handle," he hissed, closing the space between us until I felt the heat of him. "You walk into my home with your softness and your empathy and think you can fix what's broken? You think you can just draw yourself into this family?" Tears stung. I swallowed them. "I'm not trying to be his father. I'm trying to be someone he can count on. Something you seem to be struggling with." Those words were a match. His control fractured. In one swift motion his hand slammed against the cabinet beside my head, caging me. The kitchen trembled with the force of it. "Struggling?" he roared, face inches from mine. "Do you think I don't know I'm failing him? You think I don't see the ghost of his father in his eyes every day? I am trying to protect him. That includes protecting him from attachments that will break when they have to leave." "I'm not passing through," I shot back. "I have nowhere else to go. This job, Eli, it's everything to me." The confession hung between us, raw and exposed. Anger drained from Damon fast, replaced by a hollow, bone-deep tiredness. He looked at me, really looked, and I saw the weight he carried. Grief, loneliness, the impossible responsibility of protecting a boy from loss. "Don't you see, Luca?" he whispered, voice breaking. "That's what makes you dangerous. Because you care." He leaned in so close I felt his breath. For a heartbeat I thought he would kiss me. I wanted it. I feared it. I needed it. but instead he pressed his forehead to mine, trembling with the effort of restraint. Two broken people breathing the same air. When he stepped back, the storm in his eyes had calmed to a devastating, aching quiet. "Take the day off," he said hollowly. "I'll be with Eli." He left, and the crumpled drawing lay on the floor between us, our unspoken line and the rubble of a boundary we'd already crossed. The house was quiet that evening. Too quiet. Eli was already asleep, tucked safely under his blanket with his favorite storybook clutched to his chest. Marin had retired for the night, and the entire mansion seemed to exhale into silence. I needed air. I found myself climbing the narrow staircase that led to the rooftop terrace, a place I'd only discovered a few days ago. The city stretched out below, lights glittering like constellations trapped in glass. The wind was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. I leaned against the railing, my heart still tangled in the argument from that morning. I could still hear his voice, sharp, angry, trembling under the weight of something deeper than rage. And I could still feel his forehead resting against mine, the ghost of a touch that had undone me completely. I didn't hear the door open behind me, but I felt him. The air shifted, heavy with his scent. Pine, rain, and that faint smoky warmth that had started to live somewhere inside my skin. Damon didn't speak at first. He just stood there, silent, a few steps behind me, watching. "I didn't expect you to be awake," he finally said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. I didn't turn. I couldn't sleep. Then the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the stone floor until he stood beside me. His presence a solid wall of heat. "The view helps," he murmured, resting his hands on the railing. "Whenever I can't think, I come up here." "You seem like someone who never stops thinking," I said softly. He gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "You're not wrong." The silence stretched again, but this one felt different, gentler. The kind of silence that hummed with things neither of us dared to say. After a moment, he exhaled and said quietly, "About earlier today." I turned then, finally meeting his gaze. His eyes, usually so controlled, were softer now, threaded with guilt and something rawer. "I shouldn't have spoken to you that way," he said. "You were right. I overreacted. It wasn't about Eli's drawing. It was about me." I swallowed hard. "You were scared." He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "I've built my entire life on control, on keeping everything contained. And then you came here, and suddenly everything that was locked away started to move again. You make him laugh. You make this house feel alive again. You make me—" He stopped himself, breath catching. "You make me remember what it feels like to want something I can't have." My heart twisted painfully. The wind picked up, brushing my hair across my forehead. "Maybe some things are worth wanting, even if they're impossible." He looked at me then, really looked at me. His eyes traced my face like he was memorizing every line, every breath. "You don't know what you're saying, Luca." "Yes, I do." My voice was barely a whisper. "And I think you do too." The distance between us disappeared as if the night itself had pulled us together. His hand lifted, hesitating just a second before brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. His touch was feather-light, reverent. My pulse thundered. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice rough. "Tell me to walk away before this becomes something I can't undo." Couldn't. I didn't want to. "I won't," I breathed. Something in him broke then, a dam giving way. His hand slid to the back of my neck, drawing me closer until his forehead rested against mine again, the same way it had that morning. Only now there was no anger left. Just need. Just want. "Luca." His voice trembled against my skin. "You undo me." Before I could answer, his lips brushed mine. Tentative at first, testing. Then deeper, surer, until all I could feel was him. The warmth of his mouth, the solid strength of his hands at my waist, the quiet groan that escaped him as I kissed him back. The world fell away. The city, the stars, the rules, all of it disappeared. There was only this, the alpha who had once terrified me, now kissing me like I was the one thing keeping him alive. When he finally pulled back, his breathing was uneven, his forehead still pressed to mine. "This can't happen," he whispered, even as his hands refused to let go. "It already did," I whispered back. He gave a broken, quiet laugh, shaking his head. "You're dangerous, Luca." "So are you," I said, smiling faintly through the ache. We stood there for a long time under the night sky, wrapped in silence and the weight of something that neither of us could name yet, but both knew was real. When he finally left, he didn't say goodnight. He just looked back once, his eyes dark and unreadable, before disappearing down the stairs. And I stood there, touching my lips, knowing everything had changed. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still feel him. The weight of his hand at my waist, the warmth of his breath against my lips, the way he said my name like a secret. When dawn finally broke, I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the light spill across the floorboards. My heart still hadn't settled. Part of me wanted to believe last night was a dream. The other part of me knew dreams didn't leave your lips tingling. By the time I went downstairs, the mansion was already awake. I found Eli in the kitchen, sitting on the counter with a bowl of cereal, his little legs swinging. "Morning sunshine," I greeted, forcing my voice to sound steady. He grinned, milk dripping down his chin. "Daddy's making pancakes." That made me pause. Damon Blackwell in the kitchen was a sight I could barely imagine. But there he was, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, flipping pancakes with an expression that was far too serious for the task. The scent of warm batter and coffee filled the air. When he looked up and our eyes met, the world seemed to narrow again. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered there. Heat, guilt, confusion. "Good morning," he said, his tone even too even. "Morning," I replied softly. Eli, oblivious to the tension humming between us, giggled. "Daddy burned the first one." "That was a strategic test," Damon replied dryly, sliding a golden pancake onto the plate. I smiled before I could stop myself. It was absurdly domestic, the three of us standing there like some version of a family. But when Damon handed me a plate, his fingers brushed mine, just barely, and the air between us crackled. "Eat," he murmured. "You barely touched dinner last night." "I wasn't hungry," I said, but my voice came out lower, quieter. His gaze lingered, like he didn't believe me. Then he turned his attention back to the stove. For a few precious minutes, everything felt almost normal. Eli talked about his dreams, Damon listened, and I tried to breathe through the storm still twisting in my chest. But normal didn't last. When Eli ran off to play, Damon stayed behind, leaning against the counter, arms folded. The morning light hit him just right. Sharp jaw, tired eyes, a man wrestling with something bigger than pride. "About last night," he began. I froze, plate in hand. "We don't have to." "Yes, we do." His voice was quiet but firm. "I crossed a line." "So did I," I whispered. He looked up, eyes locking on mine. "That's the problem." A silence fell, the kind that pressed against your ribs. He stepped closer, each movement slow, deliberate, until the counter was at my back again. "I told myself it couldn't happen," he said, his breath brushing my ear. "But when I saw you up there, alone, I didn't care. For the first time in years, I just didn't care." I swallowed hard, pulse racing. "So what now? You going to pretend it didn't happen?" He hesitated, then shook his head, a small, almost desperate smile tugging at his lips. "I've never been good at pretending." He reached out, fingers ghosting along my jawline. "You make it impossible to breathe, Luca." "Then stop fighting it," I said, the words trembling out before I could stop them. Something dark and hungry flashed in his eyes. He leaned in just enough for me to feel his warmth, his restraint hanging by a thread. "If I start," he murmured, "I won't stop." My breath hitched. "Maybe I don't want you to." And that was it, the final thread snapping. He kissed me again, harder this time, all the control gone. It wasn't careful or polite. It was raw and real, and years of loneliness crashing into one impossible moment. His hands framed my face, then slid to my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. When he finally broke the kiss, both of us were breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine. "This is madness," he said, voice rough. "You're my employee." I gave a shaky laugh. "You've said that before. And it's still true," he said, though the conviction was gone. "But right now, I don't care." Damon kissed me again. Deeper this time, slower, his hand firm at the small of my back. The sound of our breathing filled the quiet kitchen, hearts thundering in rhythm. I gasped softly against his lips, whispering, "Eli might come back." He paused just long enough to meet my eyes, a dangerous warmth glinting there. "Then let's go somewhere else," he murmured, his voice a low growl that sent a shiver through me. Before I could reply, he lifted me effortlessly, one arm under my legs, the other around my back. My breath caught as he carried me out of the kitchen, his eyes never leaving mine. The scent of coffee and syrup faded behind us as we moved through the quiet corridors, the morning sunlight following us up the stairs. He pushed his bedroom door open with his shoulder, stepping inside. The world outside disappeared. He set me down gently, but the space between us burned. His hand lingered on my cheek, and for a heartbeat we just stared at each other. Two people standing on the edge of something that could ruin or save them. Then he kissed me again, and the world tipped over the edge. The rest was a blur of warmth and whispered names, of restraint breaking and hearts surrendering. Morning light spilled through the windows, painting everything in gold as the room filled with nothing but the sound of our breathing, our laughter, our quiet confessions meant for no one else. The mansion was silent again, except for the soft rhythm of two hearts finally beating in the same time. Damon didn't let go. His hand was still at my waist, his breath brushing against my skin as if he couldn't bear to break contact. The morning light spilled across his bare shoulders, turning him into something almost unreal. The man who had spent so long holding his walls up, now lying open beside me. "Don't move," he murmured, voice still hoarse from everything that had just happened. "Not yet." I smiled faintly, tracing lazy circles on his chest. "You're acting like I might vanish." He looked down at me, his expression raw and unguarded. "You might. Everything good in my life always does." My chest ached. I lifted my hand to his jaw, forcing him to meet my gaze. "Then you hold on this time." His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but instead, he pulled me closer, pressing a slow kiss to my temple. "You have no idea how much I want to." Later that morning, we made our way downstairs. The scent of coffee and pancakes still lingered in the air. Eli's laughter echoed faintly from the garden, sunlight spilling through the tall windows. Damon's hand brushed against mine as we passed through the hallway. An innocent touch, but it carried heat, quiet promise. Every time our eyes met, there was that same pull, that same gravity that refused to let either of us look away for too long. "Stay close today," he said suddenly, voice low, almost commanding but laced with concern. "Don't go anywhere without telling me." I raised an eyebrow, amused. "Are you giving me orders or asking me to spend the day with you?" "Both," he said, a hint of a smirk tugging at his mouth. "I don't like not seeing you." "Obsessed much?" I teased. He leaned in slightly, his breath warm against my ear. "Completely." My pulse jumped. "You know that's not healthy." "Neither is wanting someone this badly," he said simply, and walked ahead before I could respond. By noon, we found ourselves outside on the terrace, watching Eli run across the yard with Marin. Damon stood behind me, arms wrapping around my waist, chin resting lightly on my shoulder. For a long while we didn't speak, just breathed. The peace was fragile but real. "You look like you belong here," he murmured suddenly. I laughed softly. "In your house. In my life." The words hit me like a spark. I turned to look at him, his expression open, softer than I'd ever seen it. "Damon, don't say anything," he whispered. "Just let me have this moment." His hand rose to cradle the side of my face, thumb brushing over my lips. His eyes burned into mine like he was memorizing every detail. "I don't know what this is turning into, but I know I can't stop." "Then don't," I breathed. He smiled, small, real, the kind that reached his eyes, and we both turned our attention to the garden below, where Eli and Marin were playing. Their laughter floated up through the air, soft and golden, wrapping around us like a blessing neither of us dared to break. That evening, the mansion glowed under soft light. Eli had fallen asleep early, clutching his favorite stuffed bear. Damon and I sat in the study, a bottle of wine between us, silence stretching comfortably. His hand found mine on the couch, fingers lacing through. "Can you stay with me, with us, forever?" he asked, his voice low but sincere. "We need you, Luca." My heart clenched at his words, the honesty in them, the quiet plea beneath his strength. "I'm not going anywhere," I whispered. He leaned forward and kissed the promise into my lips, slow and sure. Few weeks later, the mansion felt warmer now, almost alive with our shared rhythm. Eli laughed more freely, the three of us slowly carving out our little family. And Damon had become impossible to ignore. His attention lingered on me in ways both subtle and undeniable. A hand brushing mine, his eyes catching mine across a room, the soft curl of his smile when he thought I wasn't looking. Then it started. It started as small things. I felt tired in a way I hadn't before. Mornings that used to leave me bright and alert now found me clinging to the bed for a few extra minutes. Then came the sudden queasiness in the kitchen, the tightness in my chest whenever I smelled the rich aroma of coffee Damon loved. One quiet afternoon, I sat on the couch, fidgeting with a scarf Damon had gifted me. When it hit me, this wasn't just fatigue. Something inside me had changed, something irreversible. My heart skipped, the world tilting slightly as I realized the truth. I was pregnant. I rushed to my room, my hands shaking as I grabbed the pregnancy test I had bought weeks ago but hadn't had the courage to use. My pulse thundered in my ears, the mansion quiet around me as if holding its breath. I locked the bathroom door, took a deep, shaky breath, and followed the instructions. And then 2 pink lines, clear and undeniable. Pregnant. My knees gave out, and I slid down to the cold tile, clutching the test, tears welling in my eyes. The realization washed over me in waves. I'm going to have Damon's child. Our child. Joy, fear, wonder, all tangled together in a way that made my chest ache. For days I carried the secret alone. Each morning, Damon would greet me with that warm, quiet intensity, and I would smile back, hiding the truth behind a veil of normalcy. But one morning, the nausea was too strong, the weakness in my limbs impossible to disguise. I stumbled out of the bathroom, pale and trembling, and froze when I saw him standing in the kitchen. His gaze, sharp and concerned, cut through me instantly. "Luca, are you ill?" His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge, the kind of authority that made my heart pound. I shook my head weakly. "It's just a stomach bug." I lied, my throat tight. He didn't move. His eyes narrowed slightly, senses undoubtedly picking up the spike in my heart rate, the subtle scent of my fear. "Luca, look at me." I forced myself to meet his stormy gray eyes. The intensity of his gaze made my knees wobble. "Try lying to me again," he said, his voice low and steady, while looking into my eyes. "Couldn't. I'm pregnant," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Damon, I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared. I didn't know if you'd want another child." For a heartbeat, he froze. His entire body went rigid, as if the world had stopped. Then, a smile broke across his face, slow, awe-filled, uncontainable. His hands lifted to my cheeks, thumbs brushing softly against my skin. "Another baby?" His voice was barely a whisper, almost reverent. "Are you sure?" I am," I said, tears spilling freely now. He laughed, a low, pure sound, and pulled me into a trembling embrace. Luca, we're gonna have a baby. Another little miracle. Our family, it's growing. His hands rested on my stomach as if he could feel every heartbeat, every tiny movement. I want a little girl, or a little boy. I don't care. I laughed through my tears. How do we tell Eli? Damon's expression softened, full of warmth and love. We tell him together, he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. He'll be so happy. He already loves you and me. He'll love this little one too. I rested my hands over his, leaning into him. I can't believe this is real. It is, Damon said, voice low and certain. It's ours. Every part of it. Every day. And I couldn't be happier. We stayed like that, wrapped in each other's arms, letting the reality sink in. The mansion was quiet around us, but inside our little corner, the world felt impossibly bright. There was no fear, no doubt, only a love. Damon was every bit the partner I had dreamed he could be. Gentle when I needed support, playful when I needed laughter, and utterly, completely in love with me. His attention never wavered, lingering in ways that made my heart race. A brush of his hand on my back, lingering touches as he passed by, a gaze that seemed to see right into me. One sunny afternoon, I finally worked up the courage to tell Eli. Damon and I had planned it carefully. We wanted him to feel included, loved, not confused. We found him in the garden, carefully arranging his toy soldiers in neat lines. Damon knelt beside me, one hand on my waist, the other holding Eli's small hand. Buddy, he said softly, we have something special to tell you. Eli's eyes widened, curiosity sparkling. We're going to have another baby? Damon said gently, placing a hand on my stomach. Eli blinked, then a huge grin spread across his face. Really? Another little brother or sister? Yes, Damon said, lifting Eli into a bear hug. Another little miracle. And you, my boy, are going to be the best big brother ever. Watching them, I felt a wave of warmth and relief. Damon caught my gaze, his hand brushing mine, and his smile was uncontainable, soft and full of awe. We're really doing this, Luca, he murmured. A family. The pregnancy months passed with an almost surreal beauty. Damon was constant, attentive, romantic in ways that made every day feel special. He insisted on cooking for me, even sneaking small surprises. Fresh flowers, my favorite chocolates, and gentle kisses on my temple when I least expected them. One evening, after Eli had fallen asleep, we sat on the rooftop, the city lights sparkling below. Damon pulled me close, one arm around my shoulders, the other resting lightly on my stomach. I can't believe it, he whispered. You're carrying our child, Luca. Our family is really happening. I rested my head against his chest. What if it is too soon? Too fast? He laughed softly, burying his face in my hair. I've wanted this, wanted you, for longer than I realized. This is perfect. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it perfect for you and our babies. Then, carefully, he stepped back, taking my hands in his. His stormy gray eyes were fixed on mine, wide and unflinching, a mix of awe, desire, and certainty that made my knees weak. Luca, he said, voice trembling slightly, I can't imagine my life without you. I don't want to just share this family with you. I want to spend every single day with you, for the rest of my life. Will you marry me? In his hand, he held a small, sleek black velvet box. Inside was a ring simple yet elegant, the platinum band catching the moonlight, a single sapphire gleaming like the night sky, the same color as the cufflinks he had gifted me months before. Tears pricked my eyes as I whispered, breathless. Yes, yes, of course I will. He smiled, pulling me into his arms, holding me close, his lips brushing my temple in a tender, lingering kiss. Forever, he murmured. I promise, forever. You, me, Eli, and our baby. We're going to be everything together. I buried my face against his chest. The city below us, the world around us, and the life inside me all feeling like a perfect, impossible dream.